Hello. So, I would like to kick this off with a thought experiment. If I offered you this pill and I told you it could improve your productivity, stabilize your mood, strengthen your immune system, reduce the risk of almost every major disease, help you earn more, keep you safer in work, and I told you it was free, would you take it? Yeah, hands up. Of course we would. Most of us would. Sadly, this pill's not going to do that. This one's for my acne. Yeah, 44 years old with acne. Good fun, that, isn't it? But everything I've just described already exists, and it's called sleep. Yet we treat it as optional. My name is Nicole Ratcliffe. I want you to remember that. I work as a sleep educator and expert with organisations throughout the UK. But I didn't come into this work through theory alone. I lost my own career off the back of sleep deprivation. And that experience changed the direction of my life, and it's why I'm standing here today. I had a brilliant career. I was a top performer. I consistently delivered results. And when I stepped into a management role to cover maternity leave, I took the lowest performing team and turned them into the top performing team in the business. I was financially secure. I was good at what I did. And I loved teaching, mentoring, and helping others to thrive. My identity was built around being capable, reliable, and someone people could depend on. Then I had a baby. Relating? Yeah. Like most parents, I went to the antenatal classes, I listened to the advice, and I genuinely believed I was prepared. I was told to write my birth plan. Breastfeeding's the most natural thing in the world. New babies sleep all the time. Yeah, nobody told me that birth very often turns traumatic. Breastfeeding is brutally hard. Yes, she's nodding. And nobody told me how fragmented baby sleep really is. And just trust me, no adult wants to sleep like a baby. No, it's I once drove halfway across town before realizing I hadn't strapped my new baby into her car seat. Yet I didn't think the system had failed me. I thought I had failed. And when I asked the health visitor for advice, she labelled me as an anxious mum. Yeah, oh, I heard it. The sighs, we've been there, haven't we? I returned to work because I wanted to keep my career. I reduced my hours so I could cope. But even then, I returned running on empty. I was not safe to do my job. I was falling asleep on the motorway. Almost overnight, I went from being one of the top performers in the business to one of the worst. And it wasn't that I'd forgotten how to do my job. It's not that I'd stopped caring. My brain and body were just exhausted. I asked for support, and it wasn't just help for myself. I literally offered temporary solutions that would allow me to stay safe, but also help the team bring in results. But I was told that that wasn't my job description. Nothing moved up the chain, and the support that was put in place wasn't about safety or sustainability. It was about performance plans, pressure, and targets that ignored reality. Instead of being supported, I was managed out of the business. And I was only spared dismissal because redundancy came first. That redundancy changed everything. I used that money and started studying sleep. And then I started helping families, especially other women who were going through what I had just survived. I didn't want anyone else to feel as lonely, as exhausted, or as unsupported as I had. But what shocked me was this. Even when I trained professionally in sleep, the answers still were not there. The first course I did barely scratched the surface. The second went deeper, but there were still gaps. When my child struggled again, I paid a specialist. She couldn't fix it. The GP didn't have the answers, and I was sent to anger management. The issue wasn't anger. I was exhausted. Okay? And that's when I saw the bigger picture. The sleep industry is not regulated. Training isn't consistent. Everyone tries to help, but no one owns the whole problem. Then a nursery asked me to run a workshop for their parents. And it wasn't about running a clinical lecture. It was basically just doing real education, real understanding, real support. And that's when something clicked, because I was hearing the same story again and again from other parents. They didn't know where to turn. They felt blamed. They felt alone. And that's when I just knew I had to teach this. So I took that workshop and I turned it into my first online course. And that is where this journey truly began. Since then, I've heard the same thing from parents, from organizations, from workers, from leaders. People don't know where to get help. Professionals don't know where to send them. And in an always on culture that never switches off, we are now living through a sleep epidemic. And that is when this stopped being about recovery for me and it became about prevention. Now, let me ask you something else. What do these events have in common? The Exxon Valdez oil spill, the Selby train crash, major rail crashes like Hoboken in the US, and disasters that happened in the early hours of the morning like Chernobyl. Different industries, different countries, different systems, yet they all share a pattern we keep underestimating. Human performance failure under pressure, often during long hours, night work, or accumulated exhaustion. Situations where fatigue, sleep loss, and untreated sleep disorders have been identified as contributing risk factors. These were not random freak accidents. They were warnings. Warnings about what happens when we ask tired humans to carry enormous responsibility. And then society acts surprised when something goes wrong. And we still don't talk about that enough. Today, I want to make the case that sleep education should be a mandatory part of workplace health and safety training, just like manual handling, just like fire safety, and just like first aid. Because today, we teach people how to lift a box, but not how to manage the thing that keeps the brain functioning well enough not to drop it in the first place. But before we can fix the problem, we have to understand just how badly we have misunderstood sleep. For years, society has framed it as a personal responsibility problem. Go to bed earlier, switch off, try harder. But people don't struggle with sleep because they don't care. They struggle because the systems around them make rest difficult. When we frame sleep as an individual's failure, we miss the real issue. Sleep is not a behavior. It is shaped by the world we live in. I often describe sleep as the root of a tree, so just picture this for a moment. The root is sleep. The branches are everything we're trying to fix: burnout, anxiety, obesity, parenting stress, trauma, menopause, financial worries. When something feels wrong, society tells us to focus on the branches. We work to fix the symptoms. Society tells us to add another strategy, another demand, another expectation. But we forget to water the root. And I want you to answer something honestly. When you're looking to improve your health, your mood, and your stress levels, do you put sleep on your list? Or do you go to fix everything else first? Because right now, the consequences of ignoring sleep are everywhere. UK sickness rates have broken records again. The average employee now takes 9.4 sick days per year. Mental ill health is the leading cause of long-term absence and one of the biggest drivers of short-term absence too. Stress alone now sits near the top of that list. And that is the bit we keep missing. We cannot talk about mental health without talking about sleep. because poor sleep increases anxiety, it reduces emotional regulation, it impairs decision making, it keeps the nervous system stuck in survival mode. And when that becomes normal, entire workforces start to struggle. And it's not just mental health. We are in the middle of an obesity crisis. And when people don't sleep, hormones shift, cravings increase, impulse control drops, exercise becomes harder, blood pressure rises, and heart disease risk climbs. When people sleep better, when people do sleep better, they do choose better. And when people choose better, the pressure on the NHS and on employers and on families begins to ease. Sleep is not a nice to have. Sleep is infrastructure. Now think about where this really matters. Transport and logistics, long hours, irregular shifts, aging workforces, high levels of undiagnosed sleep apnea. We hear the stories of microsleeps and crashes, but rarely do we connect it back to chronic exhaustion. Emergency services, rotating shifts, trauma exposure, life and death decisions made at 4 a.m. when the human body is biologically least equipped to perform. Construction, physically demanding job, early starts, high risk environment. In the UK, 2 construction workers die by suicide every single day. And again, we cannot talk about mental health without talking about sleep. And it isn't just dangerous jobs. 1 in 3 adults are sleep deprived. Nearly 1 in 3 people say financial pressures are affecting their sleep. You can switch off your phone, but you cannot ignore the gas bill. Sleep deprivation is not an individual's failure. It is a societal one. And here's what really shocks me. Sleep still sits second lowest in the workplace well-being position, whereas mental health sits right near the top. And that gap tells us everything. We're trying to treat outcomes without addressing causes. And a really simple way to show this, have you ever seen bad night's sleep listed as a reason for being off sick? No, you'd be laughed off, wouldn't you? Yet it sits underneath so many of the reasons that are listed. When organizations do take sleep seriously, the results can be extraordinary. We ran a small case study with Atlanta Group focusing on working parents. Now, to be very clear, the objective of the program was not about workplace performance. We were not managing performance and output or efficiency. The program objective was about sleep at home, specifically to help parents understand child sleep so that night sleep became more settled for the whole family. What happened next surprised us all. One parent said a work task that had grown to take 3 to 4 hours to complete and needed a second person to check it was back to taking just 1 hour. Not because her job changed, not because her workload changed, and certainly not because we asked her to try harder, simply because her child slept better, which meant she slept better. And that is the distinction we often miss. The program was about family sleep. The productivity gain showed up in work even though it wasn't being measured, targeted, or managed. Sleep is not an individual behavior, it is a system. And when one person in the household isn't sleeping, the entire household absorbs that cost. And that cost doesn't just stay at home, it walks its way into work the following morning. So what do we do about this? Because this isn't about asking tired people to try harder. It's about changing what we normalize. Normalizing conversations around fatigue at work. Training managers to recognize sleep deprivation as a safety risk, not a weakness. Giving people permission to say they're not safe to perform a task if they're exhausted. And embedding sleep education into workplace health and safety the same way we already do with physical risk. And the next time you hear the phrase, human error. I want you to remember this. It really is rarely human error. It's human exhaustion. And I want to demonstrate how serious this really is. Just close your eyes for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Open them. That wasn't long, was it? That 4 seconds as a micro sleep on the motorway means you've driven the equivalent of a full length of a football pitch with your eyes closed. How frightening is that? 1 in 8 people have admitted to falling asleep driving. 37% have said they've been scared that they might. 4 seconds is all it takes to change or end a life. I said at the beginning that I was often one of the 1 in 8, and to this day, I genuinely do not know how I am alive. So this is my question to you, not just as individuals, but as employers, policymakers, NHS leaders, government decision makers. If fatigue can cost lives, cost billions, £40 billion a year in the UK alone, and quietly dismantle our health, productivity, and safety, do we still treat it as optional? Or do we treat it for what it really is? A public safety crisis, a health issue, and something that belongs in legislation. And if you are in this room or you are watching this back and you have the power to influence policy, workplace standards, or public health strategy, then I'm asking you to act. Talk to me. Work with me. Because this change doesn't happen by asking tired individuals to try harder. It starts with systems taking sleep seriously. Because sleep is not a lifestyle choice. It is a public safety crisis.